Hello and welcome to round 5 of Dance Data Project's Global Conversations Behind the Stage. I have the pleasure to introduce Bess Kargman and Talia Koylass. They are both filmmakers and we are so excited to talk to them today. I am also here with our founder and president, Liza Eintema. Welcome.
Hi there.
Hi.
All right, so to kick us off, could you both just start by introducing yourselves to our audience and tell us a little bit about your backgrounds?
Hi, everybody. My name is Talia Koylass. I am originally from Chicago, Illinois. My background started off in dance. I went to Fordham Ailey School where I received my BFA, and I'm currently pursuing my MFA in film at Howard University.
Hi there. I'm Bess Kargman. My love of dance began at a very young age, probably around 4 or 5. And I continued dancing all the way up until about high school. And in terms of my education, I'm from Boston, and actually Boston Ballet was where I was trained. And I became a journalist and easily transitioned to being a documentarian, since they're the same thing. I went to Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, which is where my love of national public radio stories transitioned to visual storytelling. And since then, I've been making lovely projects about this field that I love so much. And it's also morphed into sports stories and now music stories. So it's all the same. It's all interrelated. So
could you talk a little bit, both of you, about what inspires you? Does your inspiration change depending on the project? And then how did you know that film was something that you wanted to pursue, knowing that both of you have backgrounds in dance?
In terms of what inspires me, I do think it changes from project to project in terms of kind of specific inspiration, but really the world around me, how I interact with the world around me, my friends, my family. I think there are so many things that can inspire us in our daily lives if we choose to remain curious about them, right? And then how can we integrate this into our artistic work? Because it is really one and the same, right? How we live our lives is how we create our art, is how we're in our relationships, how we come to our work and everything. So yeah, I would say the world around me is my biggest inspiration. As I said in my introduction, I did go to school for dance. In my senior year of school, I decided to create a dance film for my kind of senior thesis culmination project. And I think, choreography gives us so many tools in terms of storytelling and communicating with our audiences. And when I was able to then put that on film and work with, a filmmaker, a cinematographer, and think about all the different tools that we were given through filmmaking, right? Such as camera angle and editing and shot size and all these different things, I was really able to create something that communicated my story far beyond anything that I could have imagined. And I think, figuring out that dance and film together could really create something like that. I was like, it's a no-brainer. I have to keep making dance film.
Wonderful. And what about you, Bess? What inspires you and why did you specifically pick film? I know you had a little bit of a journey there.
I grew up absolutely loving every form of dance. But then in my teenage years, it became clear that the professional track wasn't really suited for me or a possibility. And both because of my physique and because I really fell in love with sports, and sports came more naturally to me. But I think that is a lot, my dance training had a lot to do with that. And so when you leave something that you love at a time that's good to leave it, so for me, it was during my teenage years, you don't build up a resentment that maybe some dancers create when they leave possibly too late. So with this love that, I still had, I knew one day I would love to create a film or a project that I wished had existed when I was younger. Always in my filmmaking, there's two principles that guide me, which is that a story is only as good as its characters and that access is everything. And so in every project I choose to do, it's guided by those two principles. But there's one more third thing, which is very important, which actually I learned from a really amazing op-ed writing class that I took like at night school before I even went, after Amherst, before Columbia, I took this night school class in op-ed writing, and the teacher said, everyone's an expert in something, and like the 23-year-old in me raised her hand, like, I'm not an expert in anything. And she said, you're an expert in being 23. You're an expert in getting into school. You're an expert in needing a tutor. And so everyone's an expert in something. So I thought to myself, when I was wanting to make my first feature-length film, well, what am I an expert in? Because if you don't choose something that you're an expert in, then anyone else can do that project. It doesn't have to be you. And I thought, well, there's something about the 10 years that I gave to dance. Maybe in some ways I'm an expert in dancing as a young person. And so that really made me realize, there aren't enough dance films. The dance films of my childhood were amazing, but there needs to be so many more. And how can I do it differently than the ones that already exist? And maybe I'm uniquely suited to do this because of that background. Whereas a filmmaker who's a veteran filmmaker of 40 years, maybe someone super famous, they never danced. So they're not uniquely suited for that. So that really was how I embarked my journey on storytelling and being a documentarian, but also choosing a subject that only I felt I could tell rather than someone else.
So you ended up choosing to focus on Youth American Grand Prix, which I think has a ton of inherent drama in it, right? So there's definitely great characters. And talk about the access you had, and tell us a little bit about the experience of making it. But also want to hear, there's a lot of folks out there who want to get movies made. So I'd like to hear a little bit about the business end of, because you're trying to be creative, but you're also financing. You're out beating, Talia's nodding her head, you're out beating the bushes, looking for funders and money, et cetera. So talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts process.
Because access is everything, I made sure to write a proposal and create a treatment explaining what my vision is. That's sort of the first step that all filmmakers have to go through before you've even shot. Putting your thoughts to paper is really important, and maybe creating some visual inspiration is useful too. With Youth America Grand Prix, it's really interesting because dance competitions weren't really a thing when I was growing up, and actually I would never have been suited to compete because that level of pressure wasn't something that intrigued me. And you have to have a really specific disposition to enjoy dance competitions and to thrive in dance competitions. For me, I didn't a lot of the times the reason why there's such value to a dance competition is if you're entering one that either provides scholarships or gets you seen for possibly a job. And as I said, the professional track wasn't really an option for me at a certain stage, but those with the greatest potential, especially those who are in circumstances where dance education is extremely expensive and they don't have maybe the monetary support or even family support to go and pursue that dream, a dance competition could be the most incredible experience for them. The most valid critique I got about first position was that people said it seemed pro dance competition, which is fascinating to me since I would never have wanted to become part of that world as a child. So maybe, looking back, I probably should have shown more of the darker side of dance competitions, but I really didn't want to become a project. I have nothing against dance moms, but this is different. And Youth America Grand Prix wouldn't have allowed me to create a Dance Moms.
Talia, you are an emerging filmmaker. Tell us what your biggest break has been so far and what kind of stories you are hoping to tell.
You know, I don't think I can point to one specific opportunity that I would call kind of my big break thus far. I think every little thing that I've been able to do, both, you know, with the support and help of organizations and other people, and self kind of produced and funded things that I've been able to create. Each of those little steps has kind of helped me break in a little bit more and helped me to get my work out a little bit more and tell my story a little bit more. A really great opportunity that I received while living in Chicago was from Side Street Studio Arts. They have this festival called Going Dutch Festival, and it's all about supporting and uplifting women in the arts and dance specifically. And I submitted to show some work that I had already created with them. And then at the end of the application, it was like, check this box if you'd like to be considered for like a commission to create your own new work. And I'm like, I might as well check it. I've already done the whole application, but was not expecting to get it. And, you know, a few weeks later, heard back from them and they were like, they were in Elgin, Illinois, which is a little, like maybe an hour or two out of Chicago. And they were like, you know, we really are considering your work. They drove up to the South Side of Chicago and saw what I had been working on in a church with a couple of dancer friends, and decided to commission The Good Christian, which is one of my films. You can see it on my website or Instagram for free. But them kind of commissioning that definitely was an opportunity where I felt like people really wanted to not only hear my story, but support me in telling my story. So that is one of the films that kind of has been the most personal and deepest for me that I've been able to create. And in terms of the kinds of stories that, you know, I do tell and hope to continue telling, I think stories of human experience, which I think is what all art at the base of it, right, is really based in. And really am focused on now, I think, how I can help other dance companies and other creators within dance shift their work into a more digital space. So in terms of the content of the stories, less so specific to that and more so specific to this kind of technique that I'm hoping to build around shooting dance.
Could each of you talk through maybe what skill sets need to be developed in order to be a successful filmmaker? You know, what do you see as the sort of primary or necessary things that one needs if they want to embark on this type of a career?
I think when you first kind of start getting into filmmaking, a lot of things you do are going to be self-produced and are going to require a lot of commitment and input on your end. So I think kind of having that grit and that agency is really important as a filmmaker. I think something that Bess was talking about, this idea of being an expert in something, is really important too. One of the biggest things when you start kind of pitching stories is like, how can I make sure that I'm attached to this project? We hear so many like horror stories of people going into these big meetings with production companies and telling them they're a great idea and then hearing nothing from them. And then months later saying like their ideas kind of come out not attached to them. So what are the kind of stories that only you can tell and that you kind of have a specific attachment to, that's going to make people want to make you the one to tell them, right? That aren't just great ideas.
Filmmaking is sort of such a challenging role and career path that I've told a lot of young filmmakers who aren't sure if they have a future in filmmaking that if there's anything else you like as much as filmmaking, go do that. Because your chances of career success, especially at a younger age, are much higher in any other field. And it's only for people who it would either be that or nothing. I also think, you know, I'm doing a documentary right now. We just started filming a project about the amazing songwriter Diane Warren. And even in her 60s, she has a work ethic that it's as if she's never made it, as if she's a failure. And most people, having made the fortune that she's made, having had over 100 top hits on the charts, would have probably gotten a yacht and chilled out for the rest of their lives. She has no interest in that. And I think it's having that, I mean, you spoke about drive. It's taking that drive and then almost pretending like you still haven't made it even after your first success. You still haven't made it after your 10th success. You still haven't made it after your film gets into Sundance. You still haven't made it after your film is in 1,000 theaters. You still haven't made it. It's like almost that chip on your shoulder is extremely important because there are so many people who want to be a filmmaker, you know, who want to be filmmakers, that how can you differentiate yourself? And it's like quelling the negative voices in your head that say like, oh, I'll try this for 5 years. And if I'm not talented at it, you know, I'll go do something else. It's eliminating all of those voices, I think. And then it's really, you know, I hate to say this, it's so unfair, but I see this with a lot of young people, like younger than I am, people where they're not putting in, or they don't know to put in, this is fair, more fair. They don't know to put in that sweat equity. They don't realize how many jobs you have to like have for free, work for free, how many thankless things you have to do, how terrible it is to climb that ladder. I mean, I was unpaid for nearly a year, treated horribly at the beginning of my career at a production company that doesn't exist anymore. So maybe that's karma, but it's now informed how I like to treat others. And it's also informed how valuable I think that experience was, because I spent 12 hours a day doing transcription, which actually led me to realize the importance of transcription. And now I transcribe everything when I'm shooting. So every experience, even if it's, you know, when I became a real estate agent to sort of help pay the bills, when I wanted to be a filmmaker, every experience you have, even if it's not even film related, so important to shaping your identity and shaping the type of person you want to be in your career.
I think in terms of what you were saying at the beginning, Bess, like if there's anything you'd rather do, like go do that. I totally understand that sentiment, but I think we also have to think about all the things that being a filmmaker really can encompass, right? Maybe you're not the one at the top whose idea it was, and you're the director and the producer and all of these things, but there are so many kind of avenues that you can even take within filmmaking that are still storytelling, that are still storytelling at the base of it. Even as an editor, so much gets shaped in the editing room, right? Or if you're a producer, right, you're super money savvy and you really know how to get people to say yes to things, then you can follow that route. And if you are the one who can bring people together and inspire everybody, you can direct. You can be a cinematographer if you're super individual. So I think I also want to encourage people, if you're interested in film and in filmmaking, there are a lot of different places where you can kind of fit into that.
I love what you said. And I was saying this to someone who had just graduated college and didn't even know where to begin with her film career, had no connections to the film industry. I had no connections to the film industry at all. But my advice to her was, don't call someone for advice, or don't network. Don't do any of those things until you have researched for weeks, months. Because when you're calling someone to ask them for career advice, or you're calling, maybe it's an alum, or you're calling, you've watched a film you love so much and you reach out to the director because you see their email address on IMDb. You cannot approach these people unless you have seen every single one of their films, researched where they're from, who their kindergarten teacher was. And the minute that you get a call like that or an email like that, and the person, like their first question is like, so tell me about your first film. You're like, no, I'm not here to explain. You should know all of that. And there's another way to really learn and grow at the beginning of your career, which is the credits of films are a gold mine of learning, a gold mine of learning. You can see what films share the same editor, what films have the same color correctionist. Oh, this narrative film had used a focus puller, but this verite documentary had a one-man band DP who also did sound. Knowing these things just from the credits gives you such a base of knowledge that, people who are in the middle of their careers expect from younger people that they're hiring.
Absolutely. And I did also want to throw in, I think you're so right about this kind of lack of like work ethic that sometimes can creep in, especially with younger people. But I do think that it's important to, I think there's a fine line between telling people like they need to work harder and they need to do all of these things and kind of honestly, perpetuating some systems of abuse almost that come into work environments, specifically in film and dance. I think, this idea of being, and I've done a lot of unpaid work, but this idea of you gotta be unpaid and you gotta be the first one in and the last one out. A lot of those things are true and do develop character and are very important experiences. But I think sometimes when we know better, we do better, right? And I think sometimes we can kind of get into this idea of, well, I had to struggle and I had to get it out the mud, so you do too, instead of like forward focused and how can we actually, and I know that's not what you meant, but I do think just in conversations that I've had with a lot of people, especially in film recently, being in school this year with some of my higher ups, I can kind of see that line getting almost crossed sometimes.
Could you maybe tell us like one story each of a time when a disaster struck and kind of how you navigated through that?
This is a great question because I was having a whole discussion with my director of photography both yesterday and today about this after our shoot. There is a very important negotiation that has to happen in your head when you're directing others, which is knowing when to push and when to pull back, knowing when you've earned their trust and when that trust still needs to be established. And during first position, on one of our earliest shoot days, I got a little greedy, quite frankly, and rather than doing something that should have waited for 6 months, I should have done 6 months down the road when everyone knew me and I had earned their trust and spent time with them, with no camera as well. A young dancer was performing and I got really close to him with our cameras right before he was about to go on stage. And it made him extremely nervous. Whereas 6 months down the road, when I did that, he just ignored us. He didn't care. It's almost like a subconscious training you have to put them through where eventually they don't even realize you're in the room. But at the beginning, when you're filming, they are very aware of the camera. And I got greedy. I wanted to be over his shoulder. I wanted to be right up in his face. And his mother, who was looking out for him, basically said to me, she's thinking about pulling him out of the film entirely. That what I did was completely unprofessional, made him nervous. And she was right. Like when a dancer is about to go on stage, they have to focus on themselves. They cannot be thinking about a camera, 4 feet away. And that's unfair. And so now every day is a struggle in my head of when can I push? When do I need to pull back? How do I earn trust? When is it the right moment to ask really sensitive questions? When do I realize, no, you have to wait 6 months before asking those questions?
I love that, Bess. I think being a director is so, so, so much about trust and how you can develop it. So I think that's super important. I think in kind of creating films, you know, like you said, Ellen, you plan and you plan and you plan and you plan, but I think no matter how much I plan on any film I've been on, there is never enough time. There's never enough time to get all the shots you wanted of all the, it's just never enough time. And that almost creates, I'm a Capricorn, so I like, you know, a lot of structure and things, so that on set can sometimes create what feels like a disaster. But I think the fun part of that is, what can you do while you're here? How can you kind of be creative and think differently now that this is what you're faced with? And even further than that, in the editing room, right? So you didn't get every single thing you planned for, but how can you still make something really compelling and really interesting, and probably gonna end up, you know, very much better and different than you ever thought it could have been once you get into the editing room. So it's definitely been a struggle with time, always feels like a disaster, but then how can I turn that into something else in the editing room?
Talk a little bit about being in service to the choreographer, for example, as you were with Rena Butler, your vision, and then also where you think dance, this is a big question, where you think dance can go, how it can be improved, how dance film can be improved.
Dance film is going to continue to grow as long as we continue to put as much intention on the dance as we do on the film. And I think having a background in dance, you know, is what gives Bess, myself, and so many other dance filmmakers that have transitioned into film from dance, kind of give us this really unique viewpoint on dance film, because we're watching choreography, and understanding choreographic language is a skill set in its own. Some people go and see these dance shows and will come out and have no idea what they just saw or what was trying to be communicated to them, right? And that's why I think once we do combine dance with the language of film and this kind of more visual language, we have this opportunity to help further communicate and bring more people in and help more people understand what it is that's trying to be said. And that was, you know, my goal with working with Rena, as you brought up. She came to me with this film, this idea that she already had. She had a lot of the choreography already done, and for each kind of section of the film, she knew what it was she was trying to say and what she was trying to communicate. So then it's my job to come in with me and my DP, this beautiful woman, Ashley Battle, also a native Chicagoan, to come in and think about, okay, this is what she's trying to say. This is what the choreography looks like. This is where we're going to shoot it. Now, what can we do, you know, from a filmic standpoint to further, you know, enhance that with intention, right? If we're thinking about how I can shoot a duet, okay, well, how are some ways that people have shot fight scenes if it's something aggressive, or how are some ways that we think about shooting like lovemaking scenes if this is a passionate duet? How can I incorporate some of those same kind of tools into now shooting dance? And I do think, you know, as you said, there are these kind of two things that typically happen in dance film. Either we kind of park the camera and you see everything and you're just watching the dance unfold. And I think sometimes, and I've gotten into it on some of the projects where I was like choreographer as well as like director, filmmaker, getting kind of precious about the choreography. Like, no, I spent all this time choreographing, so we have to see every step, every transition, every in, out, lift, everything has to be seen at its fullest, right? And that totally has its place. Dance for archival purposes is super, super important and will always be important. But how can we bring the camera into the fold a little bit more, right? How can we bring the camera in? How can we let it serve us as a tool?
The only thing that I want to say is, if you're doing a dance film, it's really important to take your crew and your entire crew and have them all sit in a nice little dark theater or at your home and watch dance films together. I did that right before we started filming, and it was so valuable. And then the other thing that I would say is do research. So Fred Astaire was very picky about the way that he was filmed. He wanted your experience seeing him to be the way you would see him in a theater or on a stage, which is your full body. It's full framing, with most forms of dance, it's the extremities, right? It's the feet, it's the hands, it's the long neck. And so if you're most of the time when you see dance filmed, you can tell that the person behind the lens wasn't a dancer, because it's like all of these isolated body parts and extreme close-ups, and it's not showing the full body, and the full body is your instrument. Sometimes adding flourishes like extreme close-ups is so visually appealing, because we're in the audience, we don't get to see those extreme close-ups. But I would say that the most important angle is the full body, because Fred Astaire is the man, and he taught us that.
Yeah, I think
He's indeed the man.
I think the full body is a super important one, but you know, I think it as long as it's done with intention, then you're going to get the best angle for the best thing, right? I think sometimes extreme close-ups, if you're really trying to convey an emotion, that extreme close-up might give you a lot more than a full body thing can.
Mm-hmm.
But then if this is a choreographic idea that the way you fold in shows the, like, I don't know, but right, but then seeing the full body and seeing that full thing is really important, and seeing how the extremities stretch out. So I think all of those things, when we're talking about dance film, have a really, really important place.
And
As long as they're used properly and with intention. I think it's literally, it's all about intention, right? And making kind of conscious choices about that. And I think when we don't make conscious choices, that's when we get into either the auteur thing, now it feels like a random body part, because like, why are you showing me just his arm when he's doing this big, beautiful jump, right? But if it's about how the fingers are curling in, maybe an extreme close-up of their fingers as they softly fold in might communicate more than the full body would have at that point. You know?
Amen. I agree.
there's a wonderful shot of you that you gave us where you have the baby strapped to you, and you're working. Talk a little bit about that, about being a mom, also being pregnant.
When I first met my husband, it was at the beginning of my career, and I was editing for 8 months in my pajamas, almost never going outside. I was editing my first film, and I explained to him, probably on our, I don't know, 4th date, that my first film is my baby. Maybe someday he'll become my baby, but he's not my baby yet. And my first film is my baby. And because I explained that, then he always understood. And I feel like he almost never felt shafted when we had plans for dinner at 8 and I was editing and I'd show up at 10, because he knew where I was in my career and he respected that. And he now did become my baby. And then I have other babies. Fast forward, I now have 2 very young children, and the balancing act is real. The Lean In book is useful, but not all working professionals have the privilege to have the childcare that we all deserve. If we can't all afford it, we all deserve it. And there is that balancing act. For me, I'm lucky enough to have childcare, but I wasn't ready to separate from my son when I was offered an amazing gymnastics multi-part series job. He was only 2.5 months. And so knowing that, when I was offered the job, I was sort of willing to be turned down for it. Even though they offered me the job, I was willing for them to say no when I said, I can only take this job if I bring the baby with me on shoots. Local shoots, no, he doesn't need to be there, I can pump. But when we're flying to Nebraska or Oklahoma or Delaware, he's got to come with me. I'm gone a week and I'm still nursing. And I was willing for them to say, actually, I thought they would say no. And I was willing to walk away, because what's more important than family? But the head of the company was a dad of 2 daughters, and he didn't even blink. He was like, that's fine, no problem. And I was like, but I need childcare. Can I bring my babysitter, who's also my friend? And he's like, no problem. And actually, I'm getting tingles down my spine because it's even bringing emotion. to feel that supported as a young parent by, it doesn't matter if it's a man or woman, the fact that he was a parent, I think
Yep.
made him support me, and or at least I would like to hope. And if there are more opportunities for young parents to recognize that it doesn't have to be either you're a good parent or you're a good filmmaker, you can try and do both. It will make everyone's lives better. It will make filmmaking better, art making better. And so I did take my son with me when he was like 3 months old on all these shoots. It was only a month or two before, it was about 2.5 months before the coronavirus broke out. How we didn't get it is a mystery to me, since we were on so many flights. It was really meaningful. You know, when they're 2 months, they're like a potted plant. Like, he just slept on me the whole day. He didn't make a sound. Like, that's the perfect time to travel with your kid.
We know that film has become sort of central and crucial to being able to view dance during the pandemic. And so, you know, how do you think that will sort of carry into the next phase of art making, or the art form, as things open up, as theaters open up, as companies are allowed to bring back their seasons? Do you see that still being important? Do you see it changing? Do you see it, how do you kind of see it in the future?
Yeah, I absolutely hope and do think that it is something that's going to still be really important. I was actually just speaking with the associate artistic director of a company, and she was telling me that they really are trying to figure out how to remain kind of in this digital landscape, even as theaters are opening back up, because it allowed them so much more access and connection with people all around the world. And I think even more than they knew, you know, that they would be able to achieve. So I think as we continue to come out of this pandemic and to open everything back up, it's really important to reflect and to look back on all of the things that it did kind of bring up and that it has allowed us to do more of. And I think keeping a digital platform of some sort has now kind of become an imperative for dance companies. And I think it's one of the ways, because live dance, of course, will always have a place and is always something that's a completely different kind of experience. But I think that it's really important, especially with like these contemporary dance forms, and for professional companies to, I don't want to say stay alive, I think that's a little dramatic, but to continue to reach young people, to continue to kind of stay alive, you know, to kind of stay alive. I do think it's really important that they kind of have a presence in this digital space. So I am super excited that dance film has kind of gotten brought to the forefront over this time. And I am really excited to work with different companies and help them to figure out what that looks like for them specifically.
Ladies, thank you so very, very much. It has been such an honor and such a pleasure. Maybe you all can have a shared dialogue going forward. So thank you both very, very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
So much.